Hello, everyone. Welcome to another WOTS Weekly Feature. Today, we're going to be getting a taste of a new poetry title by acclaimed poet and novelist Katharine Graham. Aether, an out-of-body lyric, is out now from Wolsak Wynn. I'm Sienna Tristan, and I will be your host today. WOTS Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabe and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you live on wherever you're tuning in from. Katharine Graham is our guest today, has a whammer of a bio, a Toronto-based writer of poetry and fiction. Among her 6 collections so far, The Celery Forest was named a CBC Best Book of the Year. Michael Longley, I love this quote, praised it as a work of great fortitude and invention, full of jewel-like moments and dark gnomic, G-N-O-M-I-C, dark gnomic utterance. It's brilliant. Her poetry has been translated into Greek, Serbo-Croatian, Bangla, Chinese, and Spanish. She teaches creative writing at the University of Toronto. Aether, an out-of-body lyric, is the book we'll be talking about today. It is her 7th poetry book. You can visit her online at www.katharinegraham.com, and you can find her on social media at katgraham, Graham, poet. Welcome, Katharine.
Oh, thank you, Sienna. Thank you. Lovely to hear you say that lovely quote by Michael Longley and great gnomic utterances.
Gnomic utterance? How specific, right? Very visceral.
Yeah.
Do you want to start us off with a 5-minute reading so we can get a taste of what you have for us?
I would love to. So I'm just going to actually share a little bit of what Wolsak Wynn said about the book, just to sort of give the audience some sort of connection to what the book is about. And I'll just say this. So, in Aether, an out-of-body lyric, Katharine Graham has created a luminous homage to family, to cancer, and to the strange windings of truth. Swimming through time and space, Graham introduces her mother, her father, and herself, and the cancers that pull them apart and bring them together. So I'll stop there, and then I will begin reading. And I'm going to start at the beginning and just sort of move around to a few little sections. So, yeah, and thanks again for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Aether. It's not the hare's scream that haunts. It's the silence that follows. I am told to breathe in. It isn't work. I'm out before I can shape the air into words. They are slicing the skin at my breast, faceless, blue-dressed figures hovering. I open my eyes. Princess Margaret's white ceiling shines down. Tears, primal deep, waiting to be released, accompany a renewed purity. My mother is a keeper of secrets. Her hair red all her life, even after it grew back in. They had to tell me. I was 11. We had recently moved to the quarry. It's cancer, isn't it? I said, holding my school books tight to my chest. They weren't surprised that I knew, though the reality of my knowing became apparent only after I'd said those words. Mom turned to me. I'm sorry this had to happen to you. This fortune seeing inside dreams, beams yellow riddles, questions scut exclamation points. I can't be more than whom. We live in vigilance after watching our mothers die of breast cancer. Those twin sexual organs that hold milk for babies and desire for others carry a terror for us. We succumb to having them flatten like pancakes on mammogram plates. We suck in our breath through winces of pain and ignore the metallic buzzing of the taking image. Our breasts don't belong to us then, squeezed and handled with efficient gloved hands, molded like Play-Doh. At night, we dream they're hacked off. We need to do a biopsy. Feathers, forever falling from birds. Feathers become my talismans during my months of cancer treatment. City streets, sidewalks, parking lots, feathers from sparrows, seagulls, pigeons. Pigeons wedged in a flower-rimmed scrum, pecking madly for bread. The machine gun stutter of the cardinal. And I remember these words from my first creative writing teacher: your subject matter chooses you. Death chose me. Ghosts have no substance, require no sustenance, walk through water, stone. And now birds, these creatures with wings that fascinated my mother, become a feathered bridge. Be as small as a hole for birds to fly through. One night, while waiting for a date for my second surgery, waiting is harder than knowing. The surgeon didn't get clean margins. He needed to go back in. I fall asleep. I'm alone in the house looking out at the quarry when a flock of mallards fly by. One flaps through the half-open window. She beats her wings in the cage of trapped space. Knocks against the family room walls. I reach for her panic. Cupping her breast, I guide her out. Wide awake, I feel her pillow-soft imprint on my palms, the ghostness of her breast feathers. A bird in house. I enter my own cage of panic. Isn't that an omen? But I guided her out. I saved her. I recall the figure-ground illusion, faces, vase. When you see two faces, you can't see the vase. The mind only perceives one image at a time. Bird in house, bird out of house, omen, gift. Water falls to where the heart aches. A ladder slowly lifts, and the birds hurl themselves up. Oh, sorry, Sienna, I can't hear you.
The one time this happens.
Oh, okay.
I was saying, as a longtime lover of birds, the last section is particularly poignant for me. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got into writing, and especially, I meant your creative writing teacher mentioned sort of that the subject matter chooses you. So how did you come to write about the subjects you write about?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I never had any plans to become a writer. In fact, just the concept was so foreign to my mind.
Writing, a thing that no one should do.
So, and it was really grief that opened that door for me. So when I was a student actually at McMaster, I know you're in Hamilton. I used to live in Hamilton, and I was a student there. And during my first year, my mother died, breast cancer, and then during my last year, my father died. So in that state of grief, it was through therapy that the therapist suggested that I keep a journal. So I did, and that helped to sort of release and make sense of all the emotions that were so confusing at that time. But what it also did was that I started thinking about the limestone quarry that I grew up beside and the loss of my parents in memory. And I went into a different state. And when I came out, I knew something different had happened. And when I shared that work with a friend, she said, "You've written poetry. This is poetry."
Huh.
I mean, it's so obvious now when you look back, but I didn't really connect that I too could possibly write poetry, or that my mind and body would want to do that. Mm-hmm. And that connection came evident to me. It changed my life, and it's really been the core of my life ever since. But it took me to Northern Ireland, where I studied. And I remember thinking, well, I'll write one poem about my mom, one poem about my dad, and that'll be it. And I'm still writing about them. So it's interesting too, how, as I say, your subject matter chooses you, and how it changes as well as you go through life. And when we lose people that we love, that relationship continues as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dig into a couple of these sort of recurring keystones of your work. You mentioned the quarry. It is probably, obviously, also the quarry from your novel, Quarry.
Yeah.
At least in spirit. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how landscapes, and this landscape in particular, keep sort of popping up and recurring in your work, and how that influences what you write.
Yeah, and I think so many things connect to not only image, but words. And of course, when we think of what a quarry looks like, it's a landscape that's been attacked, and it becomes something else. But in that something else, sometimes things are released. And in this case, water was released. So this buried water filled the limestone quarry. And originally, too, they were mining the rock, they were mining the limestone so that it would be for those viewers who've ever been to Buffalo or across the Peace Bridge, if you look, there's a line of rock along the side there, like a breakwater, and that's actually from the quarry. So this was in the late 1800s, turn of the century, and I actually have some old photos from that time, which just fascinate me. And so then it filled with water and became something else. And then quarry as a word is also connected to heart, core. So I love the way too that it's the heart of something. So, and as I say, not only my parents being sort of, hey, write about me and write about us, but the quarry as well too. And I find as well as I change, my relationship with it changes, but the image continues to feed my imagination as well.
Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of the worldview that places have presence and spirit and a sort of sentience all to their own. So it's really fascinating and a privilege to see kind of crystallized into these poems the relationship that you have with this place spirit. I'd love to also hear, you've mentioned now about the loss of your parents and the cancer that has sort of influenced your whole life. And I'd love to hear a little bit about the loss aspect of sort of these keystones and how loss does the same thing of recurring again and again and being sort of excavated again and again, quarried out of your work again and again.
Well, as I say too, loss just changes so much, but then this does happen where it reverses and the imagination helps you deal with sort of the loss in ways that the people that you've lost come to you through that place. Not only imagination during the day, but also dreamland as well. I find I'm often dreaming about my parents, and that feeds things in ways that have fed my poetry. And with loss as well too, I noticed on your feed for what do you call it, Twitter, that you talked about, well, we're going to be talking about grief and loss, it's sunny, but why not? Because everything connects. And so I think too that it's part of, I think, an instinct to keep those that are no longer here alive. And just as you say about spirit, about place, spirit of people, spirit of place, and how sometimes a memory will feed my imagination too, to work with a poem. And then it'll become something else. So sometimes it's not actually what happened. So things transform as well. And I just kind of follow these, I guess, I think of them as energy lines, like different energy lines that explore things, that allow me to discover things as I'm writing. So I find discovery is really a big part of this process as well. And loss kind of feeds into that. So.
Makes total sense. The energy line metaphor is resonating hard. It's not even that much of a metaphor. I have this very light synesthesia that mostly occurs with ideas. When an idea has, I call it having legs. Like when an idea feels finally composed enough that it can stand on its own, I get colors. So I very much understand the like something transforming and sort of growing and evolving into something else for sure. You mentioned I'm thinking about birds. I'm thinking about the feathers that you mentioned. I'm thinking about how, again, your family members have sort of remained here on this plane with you through your own cancer journey, through your writing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your mother in particular sort of kind of came back to you and was a big part of your own cancer journey and what that looked like.
Yeah, and my mother was very quiet, but she had a really strong presence. And she died at an age too, where unfortunately there's so many things I wish I had asked her, but you're coming into your teenhood and you're so self-absorbed as a teen. And that's just what teenaging is, right? But the conversation that I have with her continues now, and things that I learn about her as well too. And just in terms of even my own life experience. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was actually the exact age my mother was when she died of the disease. So it brought us even closer together. And she really did accompany me through the journey. And actually, this book, Her Red Hair Rises with the Wings of Insects, she had red hair. So she was part of this. And then also this book, The Celery Forest. So but I didn't know I'd be writing Aether. I mean, this came out as well too. But that idea too of when I experienced my first surgery, and I've been pretty thankfully healthy up to now. It was actually my first surgery was dealing with the cancer. So the whole experience, I mean, I was watching my mother die from a young age. So I was familiar with hospitals, but not from the inside. So I realized I was going through some of the same things that my mother had gone through, which, as I say, brought a new sort of way of seeing her and her experience, and also gave me comfort in a strange way. And then when I had my first surgery and I came out of it, I felt her presence. It was an incredible, I get shivers thinking about, because it was her. And I couldn't believe it. And I was like, it's almost worth it. But
what a strange, yeah.
I was just like, wow, it was so visceral. And that really was the catalyst for writing this book as well, too.
It's fascinating. Okay, so to speak of Aether specifically, it's a little bit different from some of your other poetry collections in that it is described, Wolsak Wynn has described it as a lyric essay. We were talking a little bit before, and I talked about how I'm so interested in this as a format, as a medium for writing, and I didn't know I was fascinated with it until I realized that it had a name, and it was the thing I'd been reading kind of all over the place recently. So I would love to hear from you a little bit about that format and what the difference is between a lyric essay and a collection of poems in terms of craft, or what you have to think about when you're putting it down, and also perhaps why you chose that format, or if, much like the subject matter, the format chose you.
Yeah. And it did. The format chose me. It's so true. And that idea too, I think, I honestly wasn't even thinking that I was writing a lyric essay. I think sometimes too, we like to categorize things, and I think that's important. But sometimes you just kind of go, as I say, with the energy line of what is there for you as a writer. And I think for me, it was almost a blend. By then I had written the novel Quarry, and I'd been writing, several poetry books. So it was almost like a meeting of content, form, and my imagination in this sort of hybrid space. So it seems kind of makes sense that my mind would want to take a bit of this and a bit of that. And then I realized that I could sort of explore that. And also, what I love about all writing are the spaces, the silences, and the connections and the juxtapositions as well. And it's really allowed for that, because so much of dealing with loss is dealing with silence and gaps, and having to then try and fill them in. And I found that my intuition would help me understand my parents and things that I couldn't actually ask them. But somehow I felt that I was getting answers, and the writing was part of that way of, as I say, discovery and getting these sort of intuition, just saying, yes, there is something to this. And the writing led the way as well too. But I'm so grateful to Wolsak Wynn and Paul Ramirez in particular, who really responded so positively to this book. And I've been honored to work with him on all my poetry books since I came back from Northern Ireland. And but I just, as I say, I just see it just wanted to become that way through that form.
Yeah. I'm really noticing in the past, I won't put a number on it. I won't quite try to quantify this like I've been studying it, but I have noticed in my experience that there is this real branching out and also intertwining of formats and genres. And we're talking about blurring lines all the time. We're talking about mixed media all the time now. And everything is sort of mutating and becoming a bit everything else. We're getting all these chimeras, all these sort of artistic chimeras. And I think that's a really exciting evolution in sort of our arts and our crafts. Do you think you're going to be kind of continuing down that path of just making the thing in the shape, in the container that it wants to be, and not thinking too hard about what it, if it's in a novel or is it a poetry collection or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that every journey that I've had as a writer, something kind of new has happened in that particular book or whatever it is. And I look back and I see how it's almost become like a portal. Like when I think about my first 3 books, they're generally short poems, and I love the short poem, but I love all kinds of writing. But there was one poem that I had, and it was about Tilda Swinton. It was titled The Buried, and I took 4 lines from something she said. And she said, when she was asked, where is it you would like to be buried, she said this: in a shallow grave of sand done up to the nines, in a huge flower chiffon dress, stretched out like a sail on a beach in the Hebrides, pecked to pieces by birds.
Wow.
So I know, isn't that great? It's a poem in and of itself, and I had it in my notes. And I thought, what am I going to do with it? So then I realized, well, if I pull various lines from that and kind of do what it's called a glossa, but this was a bit different from a glossa, where you take 4 lines of another poet's work and weave it into the last of 4 10-line stanzas. So I sort of did a pseudo glossa. And of course, you can't write a short poem that way if you have 4 10-line stanzas. So I realized that in that moment that there might be more for me here past the short poem. And that's what then led to this one, because it was a manuscript of glosses that became a manuscript of deconstructed glosses. And so, as I say, like I found that in these different places that when I look back, of course, I can't always see it at the time. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, that was the portal, or that was the sort of bridge to the next piece. So I just trust that now and think that somewhere in my imagination, it will help me say, oh, but I have to be aware to see it, of course. I have to be somewhat conscious of like, okay, there it is now. So, but I'm always hopeful that will be revealed to me through the writing and through playing with the imagination. I find so much of it is discovery, and by moving into these places that they teach you what they want to be and you follow that form. So yeah.
It's like making a map.
It is. Yeah, very much. Yeah.
So where can we find Aether? I know that we can find it with Wolsak Wynn. And just this week, the week of this particular video, they are giving us a 30% off of the title. If you go to Wolsak Wynn and you use the code that is on our website, then you'll be able to get this wonderful title off at a deal. But where else can we find this?
All bookstores, all independent bookstores. It's out there, and but yes, of course, Wolsak Wynn, and and I'm excited to officially launch it tomorrow. And
yeah,
do that if they like as well too, through the Toronto Lit Up, and all they have to do is register, and it's free. And so yes, and maybe one day I'll get to sign some of these books in person. Say cheers.
Won't that be a marvelous moment when we can finally put, marker to paper in someone else's hands? That's going to be special. Well, Catherine, it has been a true joy and pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for your writing. I cannot wait to get a copy for myself and dive in.
Well, lovely. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. For everyone at home, Aether, an out-of-body lyric, is available now from Wolsak Wynn. You can visit wolsakandwynn.ca, or you can order with your favorite local bookstore. This has been today's WOTS Weekly Feature. You can tune in tomorrow for a conversation about independent bookstores with Epic Books. For discounts and deals, check out toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca/weekly-features. Thank you so much, and happy Hamilton Appreciation Week.